People love a simple accusation more than a complicated truth, and the idea that XRP is centralized gives them something easy to shout without ever doing the work to understand it. Most critics who repeat this claim have never run a validator, never studied the XRPL consensus model, and have most likely never opened a technical document on how governance on this network actually works. They think that saying Ripple created XRP automatically means Ripple controls it, as if creating something gives you eternal power over it. They are trapped in the same logic that says Satoshi controls Bitcoin because he wrote the white paper, or Vitalik owns Ethereum because people know his name. They believe narratives, not systems. In the real world, control is not defined by who built the tool, but by who can change it, manipulate it, or shut it down. And if you actually look at XRP, that's where the myth dies. Critics with loud opinions ignore how the XRPL runs without mining, without staking billions of dollars, and without anyone needing to buy influence. They talk about decentralization as if it's a marketing slogan, not a structural design. They don't know that in Bitcoin, anyone with enough machines and electricity can dominate the network. They don't understand how Ethereum rewards those with massive capital through staking, locking regular people out of participation. They don't see how these systems create financial gatekeepers, miners and stakers who have more control not because they are smarter or more honest, but because they are richer. They think these networks are decentralized because they don't see a company logo attached to them, but they ignore the fact that power has shifted from corporations to super rich individuals, mining pools, and institutions who hoard influence. Then they look at XRP and assume something must be wrong because it doesn't follow the same flawed structure. XRP gives equal power to validators regardless of how much money they have, how many tokens they own, or what company they represent. Ripple, despite being the best known developer in the ecosystem, only holds one vote, no different from any university, independent team, or individual operator that chooses to join. Most critics have never even checked this, and if they did, they might realize that real decentralization is not about how popular the creators are, but about whether any one party can dictate change. They never ask whether Ripple can force an upgrade. They never ask whether Ripple could shut the network down. They don't want to analyze, because analyzing would ruin the simplicity of the myth. They rely on loud repetition, not proof. If they dug deeper, they would see a ledger running for more than a decade without a single network restart, without relying on Ripple to fix outages, without suffering the crashes that plague other chains during high traffic. They would see upgrades and new features coming from global developers, not from Ripple's headquarters. They would notice that voting power doesn't depend on money or hardware, but on trust earned through community participation. And they would have to confront an uncomfortable truth. XRP challenges the cynical idea that decentralization must be expensive, inefficient, or locked behind wealth. People cling to easy claims because they don't want to be wrong. They want villains and heroes, not complex systems and inconvenient facts. But sooner or later, the truth forces its way into the conversation. When the critics finally realize that decentralization isn't defined by loud voices on social media, but by who holds real control over a network, the lie collapses. The XRP centralization myth survives only as long as people refuse to study it. The moment they do, it becomes one of the most embarrassing misunderstandings in crypto. People assume decentralization is measured by how popular a coin is or how loud its community screams on social media. They think if no company advertises itself as the creator, then the network must be decentralized, and if there's a known team like Ripple behind a project, the network must be controlled. That logic collapses the moment you actually look at how power works inside blockchains. In proof of work systems like Bitcoin, people don't realize that decentralization is for sale. Whoever can buy more mining machines, secure cheaper electricity, and scale warehouses through industrial-level operations ends up with more influence over the network. It's not about fairness, it's not about governance, it's about capital. Mining today isn't a teenager with one GPU in a bedroom, It's corporations with millions of dollars in equipment, running entire facilities that function like digital factories. They get the rewards, they make the decisions, they dominate the hash rate, and the rest of the network quietly follows. The irony is that this system is praised as decentralized because no one sees the faces behind these mining farms. Yet the control they hold is immense, and it is purely based on money. Move to proof of stake systems, and the problem doesn't disappear. It becomes more obvious. In networks like Ethereum, control is given to those who stake massive amounts of capital. It's a system that literally rewards the rich for being rich. If someone stakes more, they have more influence, more rewards, more control, and they can shape the direction of the chain without anyone challenging them. The people with the most tokens end up controlling what gets approved, what gets upgraded, and how the network runs. The rules are written in a language that sounds technical, but the core idea is simple. If you don't have the money to participate, you don't get a voice. And if you don't have a voice, then calling the system. Decentralized becomes a convenient illusion. Wealth decides who gets to speak, which is exactly what blockchains were created to avoid in the first place. Yet most people don't question it because it's familiar. People are trained to accept that control belongs to whoever has the deepest pockets. XRP breaks this structure, and that's why critics don't understand it. They look for the same mechanics they see in Bitcoin and Ethereum, and when they don't find them, they assume something must be wrong. But the XRPL doesn't care how rich you are, and it doesn't reward validators with power based on money, mining equipment, or token holdings. Whether you are Ripple, a university in Japan, a financial institution in Canada, a random operator in South America, or an independent developer running a validator from your home, you have the exact same authority, one vote. No more, no less. XRP's consensus doesn't ask how many tokens you own. It doesn't ask how much hardware you invested in. It doesn't treat billionaires and small operators differently. Power is earned through trust, reliability, and community acceptance, not through financial weight. If you want influence on the XRPL, you don't buy it, you prove yourself over time. People mistake the absence of expensive barriers as centralization, when in reality it is the opposite. A system that anyone can join without needing wealth is closer to the original blockchain philosophy than networks that require millions of dollars before you can participate. The reason this confuses critics is because they don't understand decentralization without capital. They only recognize decentralization that's owned by the rich, not decentralization shared by the community. They're so used to financial gatekeeping that a fair system looks suspicious. They measure decentralization by anonymity and chaos, not by equality of power. But in the end, a network where money doesn't buy control is exactly what crypto claimed to stand for from the beginning. XRP didn't fail to follow the industry's example. The industry failed to follow its own philosophy, and XRP exposed that truth by building a system where power is not purchased, it's earned. People think control comes from being the loudest name associated with a project, and because Ripple is visible, they assume it must be the one making every decision on the XRP ledger. They picture a boardroom where executives press a button and the entire network obeys. They don't understand that in blockchain systems, real control isn't about fame, branding, or even influence. It's about whether you can force the network to change. And if Ripple can't make upgrades, can't rewrite rules, can't push changes without others agreeing, then the myth that XRP is centralized collapses before it even begins. The power to change the network is the real test of control, and this is exactly where XRP breaks every accusation thrown at it. Most people have never looked into how upgrades actually work on the XRPL. They imagine Ripple sitting in the center like Ethereum's core devs, or Bitcoin's mining pools, deciding whether something goes forward. They don't understand that any modification, whether it is adding a new feature, enabling smart functionality like AMMs, or adjusting a technical rule, needs approval from independent validators around the world. These validators aren't employees of Ripple. They aren't paid to agree. They aren't chosen because they're loyal. They are chosen because the community trusts them to run reliable nodes. And if they stop being reliable, their influence disappears. Even Ripple's own validator is treated no differently. One vote. No priority. No override button. Critics don't want to talk about this because it ruins their simple narrative that Ripple controls XRP. A system where Ripple can't force a change means Ripple doesn't control the network. If Ripple wants to push an upgrade, but validators don't approve it, the upgrade simply doesn't happen. The same way, a change can move forward even if Ripple disagrees. That's the part people never consider. Ripple can lose the vote. They don't have veto power. They don't have hidden privileges. The network moves only with community consensus, not corporate command. This is the exact opposite of centralized control. It's a structure that guarantees no single organization, not even the one most associated with the project, can bend it for personal interest. Now imagine the same situation on other chains that critics call decentralized. When Ethereum needed to reverse the DAO hack, the small group of core developers made a decision and the whole chain followed. When Bitcoin miners don't like an upgrade, they can stall it indefinitely simply by refusing to include certain code. Both ecosystems are controlled by groups who decide what to accept and what to reject based on influence backed by wealth or long, running control of the software direction. The public sees decentralization, but behind the curtain there are clear channels of power. Compare that to XRP, where a company like Ripple doesn't get special treatment. It doesn't get an emergency override. It doesn't even get the final say on its own proposed features. The ledger is built in such a way that not even its biggest contributor can bend it to its will. Critics don't dig into these mechanics because it's easier to repeat narratives than to understand governance. They imagine control where there isn't any because Ripple's name is visible while ignoring the hidden centralized power in other ecosystems. But decentralization isn't about hiding the creators. It's about limiting their influence. XRP doesn't try to hide who built it. It simply made sure that the builders don't own the network. And that is exactly why the claim of centralization sounds loud, but falls apart the moment someone asks the only question that matters: can Ripple force anything? The answer is no, and that truth is the crack that shatters the myth entirely. People keep repeating the idea that participating in a blockchain should require money, specialized hardware, or a significant amount of tokens, as if decentralization is something you must buy into. They've been conditioned to believe that, to help run a network, you either need to purchase expensive mining rigs like Bitcoin miners or lock away huge amounts of capital like Ethereum stakers. The industry trained them to think that influence must be paid for, that a network only works if those with financial power are allowed to oversee it. They don't realize this creates a barrier that locks millions of people out of participation. It builds invisible walls. It separates those who just use the network from the few who get to control it, as if governance should be a VIP privilege. The irony is that cryptocurrencies were born to eliminate gatekeeping, yet most major networks turned it into their core requirement. Then there is XRP, which breaks the entire assumption by letting anyone, from anywhere on the planet, become a validator without asking how much money they have, what they own, or how wealthy they are. No mining rigs, no staking minimums, no need to buy tokens just to have a voice. Anyone can run a validator on the XRPL as long as they are technically capable of maintaining it. It doesn't matter if they are a student learning blockchain for the first time, a researcher at a university, a small independent developer, or a large institution. The ledger doesn't discriminate based on capital. It only cares whether the validator is reliable, honest, and able to contribute to the network's stability. The only requirement is participation, not investment. That alone puts XRP in a category that most people don't even know exists anymore. It pushes blockchain back to its original promise: open access, equal participation, and decentralization based on contribution rather than wealth. Compare that with Bitcoin. If someone wants to mine, they're not setting up a laptop anymore. They need warehouse, sized mining operations, or they have no chance. The cost of equipment alone makes it impossible for ordinary individuals to participate. And even if they did, their tiny contribution would be drowned by industrial mining farms with millions of dollars in machines and electricity deals that no common person could ever get. Ethereum isn't any better. Becoming a validator requires staking a large amount of ETH, something most people in developing countries could never afford. Wealthy institutions can run stacks of validators, multiplying their influence, while regular users are excluded unless they join pools that then centralize even more power. These networks punish those who don't have money, all while pretending to be built on fairness. Now look again at XRP. There's no cost barrier to become part of the network's governance. It doesn't matter if you live in Pakistan, Brazil, Nigeria, the United States, or anywhere else. You don't need financial backing. You don't need specialized equipment. You only need the willingness and ability to run a validator properly. Decentralization becomes a matter of responsibility rather than purchasing power. This idea is so simple that people miss its significance. A truly global system cannot demand economic privilege just to participate in securing it. Blockchain doesn't reach its potential through wealth concentration. It reaches it through accessible participation. Critics often misunderstand this openness as weakness because they think networks are only secure when controlled by wealthy participants. They believe money equals commitment. But real commitment doesn't come from tokens locked or hardware purchased. It comes from reliability, from the willingness to maintain the network without expecting power in return. When anyone can earn trust through consistent performance, decentralization becomes merit-based, not money-based. The XRPL is one of the few systems where governance isn't an auction, where power isn't sold to the highest bidder, and where decentralization isn't just a slogan. It's something anyone, anywhere, can step into if they're willing to serve the network instead of buying it. People love to argue about decentralization as if it's a theory that lives in white papers, but the real truth shows up when a blockchain is put under pressure. If a network collapses when activity spikes, if it freezes when validators go offline, if it needs developers to restart it, then it doesn't matter how beautiful its ideology is. Its decentralization is an illusion. A system that depends on someone stepping in to fix it is a system with a central point of failure. And this is where the XRP ledger exposes a truth most critics never want to acknowledge. For more than a decade, it has operated without major outages, without needing a reboot, without freezing during network congestion, and without suffering a single successful attack. No emergency restart button has ever been pressed by Ripple or anyone else. The ledger just keeps running, quietly, predictably, consistently. That isn't an accident. That is what decentralization looks like in real life, not in theory. Look at other blockchains people worship as decentralized. Ethereum has experienced halts, rollbacks, and contentious upgrades that required direction from a small group of core developers. Bitcoin faced stresses where miners argued over block sizes, and upgrades stalled because the miners who held the power disagreed, turning decentralization into political deadlock. Solana, a chain many critics praise for speed, has gone offline multiple times in a single year because the load overwhelmed it, and each time, teams had to coordinate restarts. The moment a blockchain requires intervention just to function again, the truth becomes clear. It has a centralized rescue squad. These are not theoretical flaws. They expose how dependent these networks are on powerful internal groups. They show that decentralization collapses the second you need someone to fix the problem. XRP doesn't face this issue because it was designed from the beginning to avoid single points of failure. Validators can drop offline, traffic can surge, and the ledger continues moving. There's no emergency hotline calling Ripple to push a magic button. No one waits for a core development team to wake up and restart the system. No panic coordination to resuscitate a dying chain. The network simply keeps producing ledgers on time without needing anyone's permission or intervention. You can't fake that level of resilience. You can only build it. A blockchain that has never been successfully attacked speaks louder than any argument about decentralization. Attackers go after system weaknesses, cheap ways to manipulate consensus, nodes that can be coerced, vulnerabilities in governance. If a network can't be broken for more than a decade, that means no party, no government, no corporation, no miner, and no hacker has ever been able to take control. Meanwhile, other networks have had forks to undo hacks, pauses triggered by exploit attempts, and governance drama that influenced major financial decisions. Some chains even paused because bots spammed them. Imagine calling something decentralized when bots can knock it unconscious. Critics never talk about uptime because uptime leaves no room for their favorite narrative. A centralized network should break easily because when one controlling party fails, everything collapses with it. But the XRP ledger has never collapsed. It has never needed a savior. If Ripple disappeared tomorrow, XRPL would continue operating as if nothing changed. That is the part critics pretend not to see. They cling to the myth of centralization because it gives them a simple enemy, a convenient villain they can blame for what they don't understand. But the truth is straightforward: decentralization isn't about anonymity, popularity, or who shouts the loudest on the internet. It's about whether a network can survive independently. XRP already proved that it can. It did it not through speeches, not through marketing, but through flawless operation year after year. Silence is its proof. Uptime is its answer. The ledger keeps moving, and every day it runs, the myth loses another piece of ground.